There's a child in the water. You could see him from above, a tiny figure pulled under by the current too far out, while his parents scream helplessly from the shore. You don't have a name. You don't have a body. You exist only as a presence, a hand descending from somewhere above the clouds. But you have power, and someone is praying. So you reach down and you save him. That's how Black and White begins. Not with a tutorial screen, not with a character select, with a miracle. And in that single moment, the game tells you exactly what it is and exactly what it's about to ask of you. Because saving that child is easy. It costs you nothing. Any god would do it. The question Black and White is really asking comes later. It comes when nobody is watching, when the choice in front of you isn't obvious, when being good is harder than being cruel, and being cruel is faster than being kind. It comes when you realize that your world is changing around you, that the land itself is keeping score, that your creature is watching everything you do and learning from it, that the god you're becoming is being written into every corner of Eden, whether you intended it or not. Peter Molyneux spent his entire career building towards that question. And on March 27th, 2001, he finally got to ask it. So settle in, stretch out your hand, and join us as we look back at the God game that made morality the mechanic on today's trip down memory card lane. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I hope these words find you well. Hello, and welcome to the 291st episode of our video game history podcast, A Trip Down Memory Card Lane. Each week, we'll tell you a story relevant to the current week in gaming history. It can be about a game or the people who have created it. It can be about a console or the technology that brought it to life. We often talk about the companies that bring it all together, making our hobby video games a reality. While telling you each story, we hope to teach you something new about the topic, what it took from the world as its inspiration, or what it gave back to the world in its legacy. Today, we are looking back at Black and White, the 2001 God game from Lionhead Studios that handed players the power of a deity, gave them a living, learning creature to raise from scratch, and then watched to see what they do with it. Developed by Peter Molyneux and his team over 3 years, built on some of the most ambitious artificial intelligence ever attempted in a commercial video game. It was really a game with one simple question at its heart. It held up a mirror for you to look at, and then you spent 60 hours just staring into your soul. I'm David Casson, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, who I have no doubt would start this game with the very best of intentions, be genuinely kind and generous for, I don't know, approximately the first island, and then slowly, quietly, without ever fully admitting it, become the kind of god that makes villagers nervous. He is, of course, my brother, Rob Casson. Rob, be honest. Are you a good god, an evil god, or just a god who tells himself he's good while his creature eats the livestock?
I mean, I'm just here, Dave. I don't really know.
I'm not a god.
Pretty much, yeah. That's the way it boils down. I'm hanging out, just watching what happens. It's like Chuck watching his people, but being a prophet, but not really, because he's God.
Ray, when someone asks you if you're a god, you say yes.
All right. Both great references. You got me there. Fantastic.
I know. I'm pretty sure you don't have any familiarity with this game because the time period.
Narp. Not a lick.
I own both games in this series.
Actually, no. Sorry, Dave. I do have experience with Black and White. Pokemon Black and Pokemon White.
Yeah. I had to be very specific when searching for things because if you just search for Black and White, you get a lot of Pokemon stuff.
Oh, so, of course.
Yeah, this is a very fantastic series. It was incredibly innovative for its time. You're going to hear a lot of features that we'll talk about in the story today, and you're going to go, "What, really?" And they're cheesy, but they're also like, "Wait, really?" So it's cool. This was a very ambitious game. Great, really fantastic story. We're gonna cover a little bit of Peter Molyneux because he's such a freaking fascinating guy. I always love an excuse to talk about this dude, and then we'll get into the story of Black and White. But before we get into said story, I do believe, Rob, that you have some other gaming history to share with our listeners.
I sure do, Dave, and we'll take it away by starting on March 22nd, 1996, when the original Resident Evil was released for the PlayStation, developed and published by Capcom. Directed by Shinji Mikami, the game dropped players into a decaying mansion filled with undead horrors, impossible puzzles, and a save system that turned every decision into a small act of survival. Its fixed camera angles, pre rendered backgrounds, and deliberately deliberate controls created a tension unlike anything console players had experienced before. Resident Evil didn't just launch a franchise, it defined a genre, gave the world the phrase survival horror, and proved that fear could work just as well at home as in the theater. We told its full story back in episode 30, so if you want to go learn a little bit more, go there.
A long time ago.
Indeed, it was.
Very revolutionary game. We've covered various Resident Evils. Always throw back an opportunity to talk about the original. And I cannot stress more how much it gave to the industry. Absolutely nothing like it at the time. Not so much the case nowadays, though.
Very true. But hey, for the time,
It's the OG.
indeed. Next up, on March 26, 1997, Interstate 76 was released for PC, developed and published by Activision. Set in an alternate history version of the American Southwest where the 1973 oil crisis was never resolved, the game put players behind the wheel of heavily armored muscle cars in a world that had descended into lawless chaos. You played as Groove Champion, a reluctant vigilante seeking revenge for his sister's murder, navigating 17 missions of vehicular combat across open Texas highways with a funk soundtrack driving every moment. Built on the MechWarrior 2 engine, Interstate 76 stood out for its sophisticated damage model, cinematic presentation, and an atmosphere so stylistically coherent that Computer Gaming World honored it with their 1997 Artistic Achievement Award. It remains a cult classic of the era, a game that knew exactly what it was and committed to every inch of it.
That was another game we owned. And I remember it was one of those games in that era where like computer games were still weird with their compatibility and not everything worked. And sometimes you had to do weird things to make it work. And I remember that game was very finicky. And I was thrilled when I finally got it to work because it is a very cool game. It's a very cool game, actually. It's like it means exactly what it sounds like. It's like Twisted Metal with muscle cars, and all the characters and cars are from the 70s. So it's got that style. Very great.
So
Very
Mad
cool.
Max.
It doesn't feel like Mad Max because Mad Max is more like post apocalyptic, and Interstate 76 was more like afros and hippies and just badass mofos from the 70s.
Okay, fair enough.
Different kind of feel.
Well, you spoke about the compatibility with computers. That was in the era of floppy disks, and Dave, a floppy disk is never going to be as good as a hard disk.
It was not the era of floppy disk, but good joke.
I know. I had to try to throw it in there. It was
Okay.
worth a shot.
Yeah, you got it. We'll let that fly.
Speaking of flying, on March 28th, 2002, Kingdom Hearts was released for the PlayStation 2 in Japan, developed and published by Square in collaboration with Disney Interactive. For those that don't know, you can fly around in this game. That's why that was a good segue.
It was.
Anyway, The game that nobody thought should work, a crossover between Square's Final Fantasy universe and the worlds of Disney, turned out to be one of the most beloved action RPGs of its generation. Players guided a teenage boy named Sora through iconic Disney settings alongside Donald Duck and Goofy, wielding a magical weapon called the Keyblade against creatures known as the Heartless. Despite the seemingly impossible premise, Kingdom Hearts earned widespread critical acclaim for its combat, its heart, and its willingness to take both its Disney roots and its own mythology completely seriously. We explored its full story back in episode 239, so to learn more, go there.
Go there, check it out. Complete chance. Complete chance meeting, so to speak. There's a really cool story about a chance meeting in an elevator that made this game happen. Go check it out in that episode.
Indeed, crazy story. Go check it out, learn more. On that same day as Kingdom Hearts, which as a reminder is March 28th, 2002, Star Wars Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast was released for PC and developed by Raven Software and published by LucasArts. Returning players to the boots of Kyle Katarn, the game opened with one of the more surprising twists of the era, stripping the player of their force powers and lightsaber for the first half, before gradually restoring them in ways that felt genuinely earned. Once fully armed, Jedi Outcast delivered some of the most satisfying lightsaber combat the Star Wars franchise had ever seen, with physics-driven clashes and force powers that rewarded creativity in both combat and puzzle solving. It remains a fan favorite from the golden age of Star Wars gaming to this day. All right. And last up for This Week in Gaming History, on March 25th, 2003, Amplitude was released for the PlayStation 2, developed and published by Harmonix Music Systems. A follow-up to Frequency, Amplitude asked players to navigate a musical highway, jumping between lanes representing different instrument tracks: drums, bass, synth, vocals, activating each one in sequence to build the full mix on the fly. More streamlined than its predecessor, with an expanded music catalog and cleaner presentation, Amplitude is remembered today as a crucial step in Harmonix's evolution toward Guitar Hero and Rock Band. It understood rhythm as a spatial puzzle long before that idea went mainstream, and it did it with a style that still holds up.
Plenty of style. Are you excited for their new game?
They're bringing back the 5-key controller. I'm pretty excited, Dave.
Yeah.
I'm hyped for it. Can't wait. We'll see how it is. I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's Guitar Hero. It's really hard to mess up after they perfected it with 3 until they switched to that other controller. But they're back to the roots where it was great. So what can you do wrong? You just have bad songs in there, but that's what DLC is for.
True statement.
So it'd only be better if they added back in the vocals and the drums, because that shit was tight. But that's not what people are here to talk about, Dave. They're here to learn about the story of Black and White. So why don't you spell it out in black and white for us?
Darn, I had a joke queued up too, but that was a good one. Well, the story of Black and White begins, as so many other stories do, with a wrong number. In the early 1980s, a young Peter Molyneux was running a small company called Taurus Impex. That's Taurus. And that company's job, so to speak, was exporting baked beans to the Middle East.
Beans.
Do you think they shared the baked beans family recipe?
God, no.
Yeah, I don't think so either. It wasn't going well. Then Commodore called. Commodore was trying to reach a company called Taurus, Taurus, which was a software developer, but they got Peter Molyneux's baked beans exporting company, Taurus, instead. Molyneux, realizing the mistake, said absolutely nothing. Commodore offered them some Amiga computers. They took them up on the offer, started to learn how to program, and eventually that led to the co-founding of Bullfrog Productions with Les Edgar in 1987. Now, we've told the full story of how Bullfrog came to be and how Molyneux stumbled into the God game genre almost by accident back in episodes 107 and 145. We've covered it twice. So if you want the whole story of the beginning of his career, go check those out. The short version is that after Bullfrog was founded, there was an artist named Glenn Corpse who started drawing isometric blocks for fun. Molyneux populated it with these little people. Those people needed something to do. And in figuring out what that something was, Molyneux accidentally invented an entirely new genre of game. And that, of course, was Populous. Populous came out in 1989. It sold 4 million copies. It planted a question in Molyneux's mind that he would pretty much spend the next 12 years trying to answer properly. Because Populous let you shape a world, but it never really ever asked you what kind of god you wanted to be. Now, Dungeon Keeper got you closer. It gave you a creature to manage, a dark kingdom to build, and a genuinely twisted sense of power, but it still wasn't quite the thing. The control panel alone, with icons everywhere and options stacked on options, kept reminding you that you were playing a game. And that was something that Molyneux kind of really disliked. He later wrote that with every game he made, that he was heading towards one destination. He was always heading towards a game about morality, always heading towards a game with no interface standing between you and your world. A game with a creature so alive, so to speak, that it could pass the Turing test. And he just needed to get free of his corporate overlords at the time, which was Electronic Arts. And that, my friends, happened in 1997, fittingly by accident. Now, if you recall this story, Molyneux had been unhappy at Electronic Arts for a while. EA had acquired Bullfrog in 95, made him a vice president, and then slowly turned the place he loved into something that felt like, in the words of another developer, like a battery of laying hens. So he'd be thinking about leaving for months. Then one night, over drinks with his friend Tim Rance, he typed out a resignation email to EA's CEO. And before he could stop him, Tim Rance sent said email. Now, Molyneux tried to explain it away, but EA didn't see the joke in it in any way, shape, or form. So they told him to stay home, finish Dungeon Keeper from his house, and then leave. And so he did. In July of 1997, Peter Molyneux left Electronic Arts, took Tim Rance and a handful of Bullfrog veterans with him, and they founded Lionhead Studios. Lionhead was named after Mark Webley's hamster. The hamster died shortly after, which, depending on how you look at it, was either a bad omen or simply on brand for a company and a career that was built entirely on happy accidents.
Could be a little bit of both.
Could be a little bit of both. So in July of 1997, with a small team and no office, Lionhead Studios began the way a lot of great things begin, at someone's kitchen table. Molyneux gathered a core group of about 6 people, and for the first few months, they worked out of his house. Their first task wasn't designing a game, it was building tools. Boring, foundational, unglamorous tool building. The kind of work that no one ever talks about, but without which nothing else is possible. When they finally moved into Lionhead's offices in February of 1998, on Valentine's Day as it happens, there were now 9 of them. And they started talking about what kind of game they were actually going to make. At that point, it wasn't black and white. It wasn't even a god game at all. It was a wizard game. The original concept for Lionhead's first game had players assuming the role of competing wizards. They were battling for control of a chain of islands. Your wizard would have its own creature, originally called a Titan, that you would raise and train as your physical presence in the world. The wizards could cast spells, build power, and fight for supremacy. Now, if you look, you can still see traces of that original concept in our topic today, Black and White. Several of the miracles, as a deity, you have miracles, and several of those miracles have a distinctly like sword and sorcery feel to them. And the temples, if you look closely in the game, they could easily be mistaken for a wizard's tower. So it's still there. That's where we started. But Molyneux wanted to keep the vision further. He wanted limitless flexibility. He wanted to zoom out and see the entire world from the heavens, then zoom in and inspect a single villager going about their day. He wanted the player to feel genuinely powerful, not like someone clicking icons on a screen, but like a presence inhabiting a world. And at some point, the team realized that a wizard simply couldn't do what they were building towards. The powers that it called for were too vast, the scale of which was too enormous. The relationship between the player and their followers felt too intimate. And so when they stepped back, they realized that only one kind of being could wield that kind of influence. So the wizards put down their staffs, the titans became creatures, the spells became miracles, and black and white became a god game. Molyneux later described three things he was determined to build. First, a world where players felt that they could do almost anything, not leading them through levels and testing them with monsters, but letting them engage at their own pace and then deciding what to tackle and win. Second, he wanted a moral system that actually meant something, where good and evil weren't just strategies for winning, but choices that changed the world around you in ways that you could see and feel. And third, he wanted a creature, a living, learning companion built on artificial intelligence, an artificial intelligence unlike anything the industry had ever attempted. Not a pet, not a tool. He genuinely wanted to make something that could pass the Turing test, right? Rob, what's the Turing test?
It is a test to test artificial intelligence
And what's the ultimate goal of a Turing test?
to pass.
To pass, right? That's, I mean, in a matter of speaking, it's passed. Basically, it puts a human and a AI against one another, and if the person interpreting can't distinguish between the AI or the human, it passes the test, right?
Yes.
That last goal, passing the Turing test, he later admitted was probably insane,
For the
but
time.
nobody but nobody at Lion had told him that, because that was the kind of person Molyneux was, and that was exactly the kind of place that Lionhead was. Molyneux was deliberate about who he hired. He wanted people who didn't just carry out tasks. He was looking for people to be around him, people who questioned, who tested, who pushed him. The art team divided up the tribal village styles between them, and they competed to outdo each other. The programmers kept finding neater ways to write code and then kept trying to do more with it. He built a team in which no one ever seemed satisfied with good enough. They regularly went home as dawn broke. Weekends became something other people did. They were a determined group of people. And somehow, in their small office in Guildford, with 9 people and a borrowed deadline, an idea that kept outgrowing itself, they all knew that they were building something special. From the beginning, the creature specifically was the most ambitious thing anyone at Lionhead had ever attempted. Not ambitious in the way that big budgets are ambitious, or ambitious in the way that, sprawling open worlds are ambitious. Ambitious in a way that required Lionhead's AI programmer, Richard Evans, to sit down and ask a question that at the time most game developers never bothered with, and that is, what does it actually mean to learn?
Oh.
The creature AI that Evans built was unlike anything that came in a commercial video game before it. Most game AI works in loops. There are fixed behaviors and predictable patterns. states that cycle based on circumstances. So a guard in a stealth game might search for you if he hears a noise, but no matter how many times you hide in the same shadow, he'll never learn to look there if it's not in his programming. That loop is always closed. Evans opened the loop. He built a creature around something called the belief, desire, intention model. That's a framework borrowed literally from academic AI research. In simple terms, the creature maintained an internal picture of the world. It had beliefs about how things worked, desires about what it wanted to accomplish, and intentions about how to get there. It didn't so much react as it reasoned, and it learned by watching you. If you repeatedly picked up food and carried it to the village storehouse, the creature would observe. It would connect the action to the outcome, and eventually, without being told, it would start doing that on its own. If you hurled boulders at enemy villagers, it would pick that up too and do it on your behalf. Praise shaped it, punishment shaped it. Stroke the creature after something good, and it would remember. Slap it after something bad, and it would hesitate before trying again. Over time, through thousands of small interactions, the creature developed a personality that no two players would ever share. Molyneux once described it as learning like a clever puppy, except the puppy was the size of a small mountain and capable of casting miracles. He wanted the creature, of course, as we said, to pass the Turing test. That's the benchmark for artificial intelligence that asks whether a machine can convince a human that it's thinking. No AI had ever passed it. He brought the game to MIT to demonstrate what Evans had built. He was convinced that he was close. During one of those demonstrations, he instructed the creature to eat only the most nutritious things it could find. The creature wandered the landscape, ignoring all the food supplies. Molyneux watched, confused, as it kept swatting at its own legs. And it took him a few moments to realize what was happening. The creature had calculated that the most nutritious thing in the game was itself.
Okay.
Hey, I mean, AI reacts in things and ways you don't expect, right?
Fair enough. You got me there.
The music memory system was equally extraordinary. Black and White was the first PC game ever to let players bring their own music into the game. Literally the first game with customizable soundtracks or custom playlists. It had a built-in Winamp interface. That's throwing it back, just saying the words Winamp. You could play your own playlist directly inside of the world, which is called Eden. And your creature didn't just hear the music, it responded to it. So if your creature was punished while a particular song was playing, it would associate that music with pain. Play the same song later, and the creature would get upset. Pet it while listening to Beck, and Beck would become a source of comfort. Leave Jim Morrison on while you were disciplining it, and the next time the doors came through your speakers, the creature would flinch. But it could also go the other way, right? Catch your creature in a good mood with the great song playing, and it might start to dance. Teach it the right moves, and it would perform in time to the music. A tiger breaking into a breakdance, an ape finding its rhythm. You could then take that creature online and show it off to other players.
That's pretty neat.
Think about that for
Yeah.
2001.
That's a lot. I did not. Yeah, I'll let you go. We'll save it for the end.
The creature wasn't just learning behaviors, right? It was forming memories. And the game world that they designed didn't stop at the edge of the screen. Black and White could connect to your email client if you used Outlook or if you had what was called a POP3 mailbox. And it would pull names from your contacts list and then assign them to villagers wandering your world. If someone emailed you mid-session, a villager would look up, spot you, and wave a letter in the air to let you know.
Wow.
A random selection of villagers also might bear the names of the Lionhead development team themselves. You know, the people who spent 3 years building this world, inserted themselves as tiny polygonal citizens going about their day. And again, your creature had a presence outside the game. As it grew and developed, Black and White generated a web page on your hard drive documenting everything about your creature, its personality, its habits, its history. And then it had a website, bwcreatures.com, where you could upload that web page to the web and share it with the world. So you had all these unique creatures, because every page was different. Your contacts were in your village, your music was in your world, your creature was on the internet. So this line that existed between the game and everything else was never very thick, right? All of this is possible because your creature was an animal, bipedal, little anthropomorphized, emotive, a bear that stands up, an ape that stands up, a tiger that walks on 2 feet, but an animal nonetheless. And that was a deliberate choice that came after a much harder conversation. The original plan had been much more radical. Molyneux wanted players to be able to choose any living thing from the landscape and turn it into their creature: an ant, a butterfly, a fish, even a human being. One of the artists, Christian Bravery, spent months drawing concept work depicting what a human creature would look like at various stages of development. The sketches are detailed, ambitious, but ultimately unusable because the team kept running into the same wall. You can't dumb down a human without making them feel wrong, making them into a proto hominid, disconnecting them from humanity, turning them into something between a person and a prop. But if you gave them full human intelligence, players would expect things that the game technically couldn't deliver on. And then there was the discipline system, right? Training the creature involved praise and punishment. Praise meant stroking, punishment meant slapping. You really can't have players doing either to a child.
True.
Or a woman, or a grown man. I mean,
Anyone, human or
the
animal.
the emotional reality of leading a human being around in a speechless world, teaching them what to eat and punishing them when they misbehaved, it was just wrong. It wasn't technically wrong. It wasn't necessarily mechanically wrong, but it was morally wrong, right? And in a game about morality, they had found a line that they just weren't willing to cross. So the humans were set aside. The creatures became animals, chosen specifically because their humanoid forms evoked empathy without the weight of full human expectation. You could love your creature, fear your creature, be proud of your creature, and then you could slap it when it misbehaved without either of you feeling like something had just gone terribly wrong. By late 99, Black and White had been in development for nearly 2 years. The creature was taking shape, the world was beautiful, the gesture system was working, but nobody had written a story yet. Molyneux later admitted that this was a mistake. The freeform nature of the game demanded a narrative backbone, something that would draw players forward in the game without restricting the freedom that made the whole thing worth playing. And so in October of 1999, the team sat down to write it. Originally, they thought it was only going to take 2 months. It took much longer.
Oh yeah, how much longer?
Well, they quickly realized that they didn't have the skill to do it, so Peter Molyneux reached out to James Leach, which was the writer that had worked on Dungeon Keeper and Theme Hospital and Syndicate Wars at Bullfrog. He was now writing advertising copy as a freelancer. So Leach came on board, and what followed was arguably one of the more unusual creative briefs in video game history. The story is that Peter Molyneux handed him a digital copy of the Bible. Study it, he said, understand the concepts, then write a story about gods and men that could unfold differently for every player. Leach ended up writing over 60,000 words. That's the length of a novel. Hundreds of challenges and quests, all of the dialogue. And then somewhere in that process, the in-game advisors which were originally just utility functions, tutorial people that told you what to do. They became actual creatures. A good advisor and an evil one, like little angels on your shoulder. That's literally kind of how they're portrayed in the game. They were both voiced by the same actor, bickering and competing for the player's soul from the first island to the last. Molyneux would later say that those advisors in that process became bankable properties in their own right. And that was all the good news, that they had a story going. The bad news kind of came to the team in December of 2000 when the team had to cancel their Christmas party on the 26th. They had it the day after Christmas in order to hit alpha in time, which, as a story Molyneux told in his postmortem, alpha's a very loose definition of a milestone. And what it really meant was, in practice, that all the features were locked, right? The game existed at that point, December 26, 2000. At the time, it had over 3,000 bugs.
Jesus.
And they had 6 weeks to get that number down to 0. And the problem with bug fixing, as a developer will tell you, is that fixing one bug tends to create 3 more. So the team worked as hard as they could, and the numbers crept down slowly rather than dropping at the rate that they were, actually solving things. Lionhead circulated bug lists to every member of staff. They put a chart on the wall, updated it daily. Some days the numbers actually went up, which had to have been frustrating, right?
Oh, for sure.
Imagine looking at a mountain that's growing faster than you can climb it.
Yep, that I couldn't. Nope.
The code base didn't help. Black and White had grown to over 2 million lines of code. Loading even the simplest tool took several minutes. Compiling the entire game took over an hour. Towards the end, a single small change could consume an entire day, right? Writing it, checking it in, waiting for the compile, then discovering it had broken something else. So you start the whole process over. They implemented a buddy system. Nothing got checked in without someone watching over your shoulder at every stage, because exhausted developers that were checking in changes at 4 in the morning had a habit of thinking they fixed something when they actually made it worse. Molyneux later wrote that it felt like the game just didn't want to be finished and perfected. That fixing the last 10 bugs was harder than fixing the first 3,000. That with every solution came 4 new problems. Now, the music, the dialogue, and the sound effects alone took up 5 times as much space as the game itself. They compressed everything they could to get it to barely fit on a single CD, and had 15 language versions to vocalize. So, according to them, the final weeks became this blur of translation checks, recording sessions, and questions that nobody really had time to answer. The game ended up going gold on March 16th, 2001. 11 days later, it shipped. And almost immediately, the rumors started, right? Players were hitting technical issues. Word spread online Electronic Arts had shipped a beta version by accident. Lion had denied it. The bugs were real, they said, but the game was finished. So a patch ended up coming in June. Molyneux later called it the most important and most difficult game he had ever made. And frankly, he wasn't wrong on either count. Rob, hearing about the final weeks of Black and White's development, the buddy system at 4 in the morning, the bug chart on the wall going the wrong direction, 2 million lines of code that took an hour to compile, it kind of makes me genuinely grateful that starting a podcast doesn't require any of that.
Yeah, no bug lists, no canceled Christmas parties, no accidentally breaking everything at 4 in the morning.
Exactly. And I think that's largely because I use Zencaster. It's an all-in-one podcasting platform that takes the chaos out of the process entirely. You log in from your browser, hit record, and you're instantly capturing studio quality audio and up to 4K video. There is no complicated setup, no custom written software, no compiling.
What about when things go wrong mid recording? Because things always go wrong.
Well, that's where Zencaster's multi-layered backups come in. Even if your connection drops, your recordings stay safe and the highest quality. No lost work, no starting over.
And editing? Don't tell me it takes 6 weeks.
Not even close. Zencaster's post production tools automatically clean up background noise, trim filler words, and balance your audio. The polish happens without the grind.
All right, once it's done, how do we get it out there? Don't say that I have to do 15 different language versions.
Nah, just one. Zencaster distributes your podcast directly to all the major platforms Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more, all from one single dashboard. Record, refine, release.
So basically, the opposite of shipping black and white.
Pretty much. If you're interested, go over to zencaster.com/pricing. Use our offer code, all one word, memory card lane, and you can get 30% off the first month of any paid plan. If you've got a story to tell, Zencaster makes sure that the only chaos is in your content.
No buddy system required.
That's right. Head over to Zencaster, use our code, all one word, memory card lane, and you can get 30% off the first month.
So after all that chaos, was it worth it, Dave?
Well, when Black and White shipped on March 27th, 2001, the response was immediate and nearly unanimous. IGN gave it a 9.7. Edge called it a colossal achievement. GameSpot's Greg Kasavin wrote that no other PC game had so effectively combined so many seemingly incompatible elements into one highly polished game. PC Zone gave it 95, PC Gamer gave it 94. Computer Games Magazine praised the creature AI as amazing while noting the bugs, and GamePro said it felt like interacting with the real world. So all in all, its Metacritic score is a 90. The awards followed. Black and White won the BAFTA for interactivity and for moving images. The Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences awarded it both Computer Game of the Year and Computer Innovation. The Game Developers Choice Awards gave Richard Evans the Excellence in Programming Award for the Creature AI specifically, a recognition really that what he built wasn't just impressive for a game, it was impressive, full stop. The Guinness Book of World Records listed it as having the most intelligent being in a game, so it held a record at the time too. It sold 2.5 million copies on PC by 2006. For a brief moment, it felt like Peter Molyneux had done exactly what he set out to do. He had built the game that he always wanted to play, and the world had agreed that it was worth playing. But as we know with all things, the world has a way of reconsidering. In 2003, GameSpy named Black and White the most overrated game of all time.
Damn.
Their argument wasn't that it was bad. They didn't say it was bad. They felt and acknowledged the gap between what it had promised and what it delivered was wider than what the reviews had acknowledged. And let's be fair about something. Peter Molyneux is well known for overpromising. That's like Peter Molyneux, right? If you got Molyneux, you're overpromising. So the townspeople, they said, never felt truly alive. The creature, for all its technical brilliance, was underused by the very story meant to showcase it. And I think that last point is worth sitting with because if you've ever played it, you know that at the end of the second island, there's an evil god that steals your creature and escapes through a vortex. And to get it back, you have to convert the entire third island on your own. So Black and White has 5 islands. And that means that you pretty much play a full quarter of the game, an entire island, without the most important and compelling thing in it, all for the sake of a dramatic plot twist. And then at the end of the game, the villain curses your creature. It begins to shrink. Its moral alignment shifts. And so everything you built over dozens of hours slowly unravels right before the credits roll. Meanwhile, the tutorial lasts like an island and a half. So when your unit of measurement for tutorial is islands, something has kind of gone wrong, right?
Yeah.
These weren't small problems, they were structural ones. And they point to something deeper that's important to know about this game. The possibility that Lion had never fully understood what they had actually created. They built machine learning that made players genuinely care about a collection of pixels in the shape of a monkey. And with that, they made you feel like a parent, a teacher, or companion. And then they spent the rest of the game treating that relationship as a plot device. And as I said, Peter Molyneux's ambition, always present. His reach was extraordinary, but more often than not, I would say his grasp falls short of what his vision demanded. None of that technically changes what Black and White actually was, or what it still is to the people who remember it, though. It was the first mainstream game to genuinely implement machine learning, was the first PC game to support custom soundtracks. It asked questions about morality that most games still don't bother with. It built a creature that learned from watching you, remembered your music, and reflected your personality back at you in ways that genuinely felt alive, right? Today you can't even play it though. The intellectual property is actually caught between two companies. Microsoft owns Lionhead, but EA owns the publishing rights to Black and White. And from what is out there, neither has any incentive to resolve the situation. So there's no digital release, there's no remaster, there is no re-release of any kind. If you want to play Black and White today, you need the original discs and a machine old enough to run it. Unless you know about Open Black, there is a community of developers out there that has spent years building an open source recreation of the game from scratch. They've been reverse engineering its systems and rebuilding its engine for modern hardware, but it's still in development. It's not, it's a work in progress. It may never be finished. But I do think that the fact that it exists at all says something important, right? Because if you spend years rebuilding something that you think is important, it's worth preserving, right? And that's probably the truest measure of Black and White's legacy. It wasn't the awards, it wasn't the sales figures. It's not even really the creature that Richard Evans made that he got a lifetime achievement award for. I think what's probably most important is Open Black, right? It's the fact that 20 plus years later, people are still trying to bring the game back. If today's episode sent you deeper into the world of Peter Molyneux, we've got plenty of ground already covered that connects it directly to the story. Episode 107 traces Molyneux's full career arc from his earliest days through the development of Fable. Uh, Fable's the game that very much carries forward everything that Black and White had started. And episode 145 tells the story of Populous, the game that invented the God genre and really planted the seed that Black and White spent 12 years growing into. Between those two episodes and today's, you really have a complete picture of Peter Molyneux, one of the most fascinating careers in the history of the medium, the baked beans guy. You can, of course, find those episodes and everything else in our archives at our website, www.memorycardlane.com. Rob, what else can listeners find when they head over to the site?
You can find the calendar of our future episode topics, know what we'll be talking about in our coming weeks. You can find a link to our Discord where you can chat with Dave and I. You can find a link to our Patreon where you can get access to ad-free and unedited versions of our podcast. And you can find links to our social media where I am on several platforms as Rob_O_Raptor and Dave.
I can be found on various platforms as David is wrong. Each week, we'll tell you one story relevant to the current week in gaming history. It can be about a game, a person, a technology, or a console. We've even covered a few places as well. While telling you each story, we hope to teach you something new about the topic, what it took from the world as its inspiration, or what it gave back to the world in its legacy. When we sit down to research new topics each week, we get excited when we find out new things to share with you. It's this fantastic cycle of teaching and learning, learning and teaching. And in celebration of said cycle, we like to talk about our takeaways each week. So, Rob, what did you learn today?
Well, having no knowledge of this game, it's kind of astounding to me that such an early game had machine learning and something that seemed, you know, granted, machine learning is in itself somewhat complex, but it just seemed like a lot that it was so reactive not only to like actions but sounds and um, just all of that. It's a lot, and to know that it was in such an early game is kind of astounding to me. So plain and simple, I know it's lame, but just crazy and really cool.
It is really cool. This game, I I can tell you for sure that I didn't remember some of the things, or I might have never even known that like it connected to your email. I read that and I was like, whatever. And then I went and I picked up the manual for the game because I literally still have my physical copy, and it's literally there in the manual. And I was like, oh, well, that's cool.
Yeah, that's mind blowing that it was able to interact with so much. Although it also leads questions to how much access it really had to your computer. You bring
Yeah,
up you bring up a good question now that I think about it.
to be fair, those were things we didn't think about at the time.
Very
But
true.
those were things we didn't think about because we didn't have to think about it. 2001 is still, I mean, I guess high speed internet was a thing, but that's still early, right? The mid 90s is when the internet really started to proliferate. We're in the .com bubble, kind of in the early 2000s when this came out, or had burst, really. But um, it was still early before we had to think about that, before the internet was so pervasive, so to speak. Still before the iPhone era. I think that was when everything changed personally.
Yeah, that's totally fair. But that's my big takeaway, Dave. What about yourself?
I I never I never realized the AI. On top of the fact that I never realized the things about the game, like the email and that, I never realized how extensive the AI was. I was a Peter Molyneux fan, right? I had played Populous. I had played Bullfrog, one of my favorite developers of all time, right? The Theme Hospital, the Theme Park, Magic Carpet, every game that Bullfrog came out with, I needed it. I loved all of them, right? So I was a fan. And so when it's like, hey, we're making a game like Populous where you're a god, but you get to have a creature control a creature, I was sold. And I remember being sold on it as like this, hey, this is a creature that learns from you. But I would have been what, 17 at the time? 17. I don't think you really understand, and I don't think many people, to be fair, understood at the time. AI, there wasn't a term for I mean, I'm sure they called it AI, but we didn't know what it was like we do now, right? AI was Skynet. It was the Terminator coming to get you in 2001, you know? Like it, I don't think that I ever, and there were probably a lot of people because it was new terminology. I don't think there were a lot of people that actually appreciate or even probably understood what this game did. Full stop. I, I don't know what else to say about it. Fantastic game. Love this game. Played through this game, but easily can tell you I didn't appreciate it for what it was. And it was a technological marvel in 2001. Shoot, it might still be a technological marvel today, you know? So that's my takeaway. Rob,
Yeah.
before I wrap it up and take it into next week, is there anything else you'd like to add to today's episode?
I'll just take a quick moment to say thank you so much, everyone, for listening. It means the world to have you along with us as we go through this each week. So thank you.
Peter Molyneux spent his career stumbling in the right direction. A wrong number led to Bullfrog, a drunken email led to Lionhead, and 12 years of making games that were almost the thing he wanted to make finally led to Black and White, the game that he had always been building towards. And what he built was a mirror, a world that changed to reflect your choices, a creature that learned from watching you and grew to reflect who you were. A game that didn't just ask what kind of god you wanted to be, it watched your answer for 60 hours and showed it back to you. It wasn't perfect. Molyneux said so himself, but it asked questions that most games still don't bother asking. And unfortunately, today, with the game locked in legal limbo and unavailable on any modern platform, a lot of people can't play it. And that, on the other hand, there is a community of developers out there still rebuilding it from scratch because some games make people feel something so specific that 25 years later, I mean, they're still trying to bring it back. And to them, black and white was that kind of game. Next week, we're trading the God game for a little more hands on. In 2005, a small studio called Traveler's Tales did something that probably shouldn't have worked. They took one of the most beloved film franchises in history, rebuilt it entirely out of plastic bricks, and made it funnier than the movies it was based on. Lego Star Wars didn't just change what a licensed game could be, it changed what Lego could be. But of course, before we get to the game, since it's the first time we'll cover it, we need to talk about the brick. Because the story of Lego, a Danish carpenter, a simple idea, and a toy that survived depression, fire, and near bankruptcy, is one of the great origin stories in the history of design. So join us as we explore the bricks, the license, and the studio that figured out how to make destruction feel like joy on next week's trip down memory card lane. Do the thing.
Doob doom dop 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 doo ow.